Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to Madam Atira. I hope you're in excellent condition always. So we are from class 4 group 5. We'll do a presentation according to one case study. Before we start, let me introduce our group members. First we have Bainun, Farah dan myself Ifa, Fatimah and Nadia. The title of our case study have the relationship with brain and bacteria. It is about is bacteria really can melt our brain? First and foremost, this video contains introduction, type of disease, cause and symptoms, diagnosis, treatment and conclusion. Let's go through the introduction first. This is a little facts about bacteria. Bacteria are a small single-cell organism and we can find it everywhere on earth. In our body, they are overflowing with bacteria and actually bacterial cells exceed the number of human cells in our body. But the majority of the bacteria in our body are harmless and some are even beneficial. There is also bad bacteria that we call as pathogenic that will cause diseases. Okay, now we're gonna take a look about brain with Farah.
Alright, thank you to Ifa. Next is about brain. The human brain is the most complicated organ in our body. This 3-pound organ is the seat of intelligence, a sense translator, a movement originator, and a behavior controller. The source of all the attributes that constitute our humanity, lying in its bone shell and cleansed by protecting fluid. In other words, the brain is the human body's crown. Next, about the studies that have been presented by the experts during the scientific meeting Neuroscience 2018. When the researchers looked at high-resolution image of slice of post-mortem human brain tissue, they found signs of bacteria. The unexpected discovery was made by chance. Actually, the researchers wanted to see if there were any variations in the brain of those who had schizophrenia and those who didn't. However, the scientists keep seeing strange rod-shaped things in the image. Initially, I just dismissed them because I was looking for something else, said by the study lead author Rosalinda Roberts, a neuroanatomist and professor in the Department of Psychiatry and Behavioral Neurobiology at University of Alabama in Birmingham. Eventually, the researchers consulted some colleagues about the objects and discovered that they were bacteria. In the new study, the researchers analyzed samples from 34 postmortem of human brains and found bacteria in every brain. The bacteria seem to prefer certain parts of the brain as the microbes tend to cluster in areas known as hippocampus, prefrontal cortex, and substantia nigra. And often the bacteria were found in star-shaped brain cells known as astrocytes that were near the blood-brain barrier. They discovered that most of them belong to the Firmicutes, Proteobacteria, and Bacteroidetes families of bacteria, which are commonly found in the human diet. Then the researchers analyzed mouse brains that were preserved immediately after death to rule out the possibility that the brain samples were contaminated. The scientists discovered abundant bacteria in the mouse brains, similar place to those seen in human brain. And when the researchers analyzed germ-free mice, which are genetically engineered to not have any bacteria living in them, the scientists did not find any bacteria in the brains. The findings raised the possibility that, like the human gut, the brain may also have a microbiome. Previous studies have suggested that bacteria in the gut may affect the brain indirectly. For example, by producing chemicals or proteins that make their way into the brain. Okay, next we will continue back with overview presented by Ifa.
Alright, thank you Farah. As the overview, we know that infection of the brain can be caused by the bacteria, and in some disorder, infection can be confined to one area called empyema or an abscess. Empyema is the form in an existing space in the body, such as the space between the tissues that cover the brain, while abscess in which resemble balls and can form anywhere in the body, including our brain. Besides, bacteria can reach the brain in several ways, Some were being carried by the blood and some might entering the brain directly from outside, or they might spreading from nearby infected structures. So we proceed with the second content with Fatima.
Thank you, Ifa. Now moving on to the type of bacterial brain disease. The first one is meningitis. Second, Streptococcus pneumonia, pneumococcus. The third one is Neisseria meningitis, meningococcus. The fourth one is Haemophilus influenza, haemophilus. The fifth one is Listeria monocytogenes, listeria. And the last one is mycoplasma. Now I will let Nadia to explain the causes of each disease.
Thank you, Timo. Now I will explain the causes of bacterial meningitis, how it spread to the brain, and the bacteria that cause this infection. This bacteria can be spread through close contact or contaminated food preparation. Bacteria that enter the bloodstream and travel to the brain and spinal cord cause acute bacterial meningitis. But it can also occur when bacteria directly invade the meninges. This may be caused by an ear or sinus infection, a skull fracture, or rarely sometimes surgeries. The bacteria most likely to lead to a bacterial brain infection are Streptococcus pneumonia, Group B Streptococcus, Neisseria meningitidis, Haemophilus influenza, and Listeria monocytogenes. First, Streptococcus pneumoniae. This bacterium is the most common cause of bacterial meningitis in infants, young children, and adults. It more commonly causes pneumonia or ear or sinus infections. A vaccine can help prevent this infection. Secondly, Neisseria meningitidis. This bacterium is another leading cause of bacterial meningitis. This bacteria commonly cause an upper respiratory infection but can cause meningococcal meningitis when they enter the bloodstream. This is a highly contagious infection that affects mainly teenagers and young adults. A vaccine can help prevent infection. Even if vaccinated, anybody who has been in close contact with a person with meningococcal meningitis should receive an oral antibiotic to prevent the disease. Next is Haemophilus influenza. Haemophilus influenza type B HIV bacterium was once the leading cause of bacterial meningitis in children. But new HIV vaccines have greatly reduced the number of these cases of this type of meningitis. Lastly, Listeria monocytogenes. This bacteria can be found in unpasteurized cheese, hot dogs, and lunch meats. Pregnant women, newborns, older adults, and people with weakened immune system are more susceptible. Listeria can cross the placental barrier, and infections in late pregnancy may be fatal to the baby. The symptoms of a brain infection will depend on the area of the brain that has been infected, as well as the severity of the infection. Early meningitis symptoms may mimic the flu influenza, and symptoms may develop over several hours or over a few days. Possible signs and symptoms in newborns and infants are constant crying, poor feeding, inactivity or sluggishness, stiffness in body and neck, and lastly is difficulty waking from sleep. Anyone older than the age of 2 may have these signs, which are severe headache, photophobia, nausea and vomiting, stiff neck, sudden fever, and seizures. That's all from me. Next, I will pass the slide to Bainu.
Thank you, Nadia. Diagnosis. It has 3 diagnoses, which is first, imaging studies. It used to detect inflammation or lesion in the brain or spinal cord. It has 2 methods, which is brain MRI and CT scan. Brain MRI can detect an absence or lesions, while CT scan used to detect inflammations. Second, blood cultures. It's drawn to determine the specific type of bacteria causing the infections. The information be used to select the most effective antibiotic medications. Lastly, lumbar puncture or spinal tap. It involves inserting a needle in between the vertebrae in the lower back to remove cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebrospinal fluid flows through the brain and spinal cord. This fluid tests for bacteria, proteins, or increased white blood cells. Treatment. It also have 3 types of treatment. First, antibiotic. Use the antibiotic if a bacterial infection is suspected or while waiting for the test result. Second, corticosteroids. It helps to lower inflammation in the brain or spinal cord. It also helps to reduce swelling and immune system activity. And third, antiviral medications. Usually prescribed right away if the medical team suspect that patient's brain infection is caused by a virus. And now I will pass to the next presenter.
Thank you, Bainun. Now we've come to the conclusion part of this case study. Earlier, we've discussed about the type of diseases, causes, symptoms, diagnosis, and treatment of the diseases. So, in order to prevent bacterial brain disease, it is advisable for us to keep clean environment around us. Second, to avoid direct contact with the affected patients. Third, regular medical checkup at the hospital. Fourth, to eat healthily and exercise regularly to boost our immune system. Last but not least, to consume appropriate amount of supplements with the doctor's consult.
Here are some of our references. That's all from us. Thank you.